6, 5, 4,
Main
3,
engine start.
2, 1.
Lift
off.
Welcome to A Valid Answer.
With Scott and Marshall.
And a countdown.
And the countdown. Well, yeah, with Scott and Marshall, where a capitalist conservative pastor talks with a socialist liberal atheist and talk about all kinds of different things. Today, we are talking about NASA. That's why we had the countdown going down. In fact, I was watching, was it Saturday night? Sunday night? Mm-hmm. Sunday night, I was watching Apollo 13. That was last night. Yeah, watching Apollo 13 with my kids. Got to the launch section, and they got, and that, gentlemen, is how we do that. And then we've stopped right there and then played a board game.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, but that was like family time watching it. I really, 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 really enjoyed First Man. That movie was phenomenal.
I liked it. I didn't like the camera though. I mean, it was constantly shaking and moving.
You know what? It was. Here's the thing. It was talking a little bit of film right now. It was I believe, I have not heard behind the scenes, but as a filmmaker, when I was watching it, it was to me and spoiler alert. Okay, they land on the moon.
No way. They make it?
They
really?
make it. But I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, tune out for just a second here because I don't want to ruin that for you. But there is a moment in the movie, as a filmmaker, I'm watching it, and I believe the filmmaker was intentionally choosing nothing wider than a 50 millimeter lens for the entire movie. So everything was like that close. Everything was just right here and handheld. And then you get into they wanted to illustrate how rickety things really were. Like this is the 60s and it wasn't like
they still are.
Yeah. And but it was just, they wanted to really, it was dangerous. It was,
still is.
And it still is. But I'm just saying and that's never really depicted in a lot of times in our film. It's exciting. But it's like, hey, this is on the edge of falling apart. Like this is right on the edge. And so everything is close, shaky. Everything is right in the eyes, or that until one moment in the movie. I don't know if you remember that. It literally took my breath away in the theater. We're watching it on IMAX and everything's tight. And they land, they're landing on the moon. You don't see the spaceship. You don't see that. You just see his face, his eyes as he's concentrating, and it lands, the whole thing like that. They're in the spacesuit and they open the door and the camera comes out of the cockpit and it's the first wide shot you see, and it is completely silent, wide moonscape. It's literally, and I'm in the theater, and it literally, it took my breath away. It was just like, and everything up to that moment was for that moment. Like the filmmaker was making everything like this, so that in that moment, you as an audience would feel that, wow,
he finally quit shaking the damn camera.
Yeah, no, it was.
Thank you.
But it's all for that moment right there. And so apparently you didn't appreciate the choice of the director to make you feel claustrophobic and confined until that moment.
Yeah, but I think it's like 1 or 2% is your risk of death overall. As an astronaut,
what do you mean?
Every time. I think your overall chances of death are somewhere between 1 or 2%.
That low?
Yeah, I know. Surprising, right? But when you consider how many space missions they fly, and how many astronauts have flown since 1961 or 63, it was Yuri Gagarin. I think it was 61. There's been a few hundred or so, and actually more than that, I think now. And I think the overall, the odds are 1 to 2% of them, end up dying. There's only been I don't know, maybe 20-something have perished. 14 from the United States, 3 more on the ground, so 15, 16, 17 astronauts in all from the United States. And I think the Soviet Union, Russia, had a similar number. I don't think the Russians have actually lost any. The Soviets did during the Soviet Union.
Yeah, they're not Russia. Now, has America actually... I guess Columbia breaking up on impact would be considered actually lost in space.
It was lost in reentry. It was lost in Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah. But actually, Challenger was not in space. And
one of those astronauts was Israeli. And I think another one may have been Indian. I'm not sure. So,
right. But I'm just saying, actually died in space. I guess you would consider that flight as dying in space because it was still in space and on the reentry, or...
I don't know that anyone has actually died in space.
Okay.
Everyone who has died has either died
on the pad,
on the way up or on the way back down, not necessarily on the pad. The 3 astronauts, Edwin, White, and Chaffee, perished on the pad because it was a training accident, if you will. It was a design flaw, essentially. There's several errors and design flaws. And then Challenger, they should have, it was also a limitation of the design. It got too cold. Mm-hmm. And they had some engineers who said, wait a minute, we don't think this is going to be safe. We don't think the
O-rings... So sorry, I forgot to post. We went right into it. I forgot to post this to...
can sustain it.
Comcast.
And then, of course, on Columbia, you had that piece of foam break off and break the tile.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, nobody had really ever envisioned that scenario.
That's one of those, perfect storm things where it's not like necessarily a design flaw.
Yeah.
It was just,
These systems are incredibly complex. I mean, the space shuttle is probably the most complex system, working system ever put together by humanity, perhaps other than a government itself.
What's that line from Armageddon? You're sitting on something with over 2 million moving parts built by the lowest bidder.
Yeah. So there you go. So I think the question that we're going to address today is NASA worth the cost? Is it worth the money? Is it worth the human capital, the risk of death, the lives we lose, and so on?
What do you think? Do you think the American people care about it as much anymore? I mean, we're watching this video. We linked the video in there. Please watch it. It's
it's a YouTube link.
It's a YouTube link. Don't watch it right now because then you can't talk to us. But go back afterwards and watch it. It's a very moving piece. I really enjoyed it. It's only like 3 minutes long, 3 or 4 minutes long, something like that. So it's not a whole.
Yeah, it's Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, and it's Neil deGrasse Tyson like giving a very impassioned speech about NASA and about going into space and discovery in space and stuff like that. And it has a bunch of NASA footage through the years put over the top of it. And really well done. Enjoyed it. But one of the things it talks about is how the war was driving NASA, and being the first made like America like really care about the future and care about being in space and all this kind of stuff, and that motivated an entire nation. Do you think that motivation still exists in this nation as a whole?
I'm skeptical of that. I think there's fascination. I think the fascination is going to grow since we're about to send humans back into space, perhaps as early as this year, on a private rocket. SpaceX, I think, is preparing to put humans up. And then Boeing and NASA through Boeing is preparing to possibly put some people up, if not this year, next. And it's going to be a return to space after several years of having to fly astronauts on a Russian rocket.
The Soyuz, which as a claustrophobic
crazy
person,
reliable though.
Yeah, but as a claustrophobic person, from what I hear, I would die. I would not be able to make it in that craft. As I understand, it's just really, really tight fitting for several hours until you get there. So,
but that's the case in all spacecraft.
I mean, from what I understand, the Soyuz very much so, because especially on the way up, they're packing every square inch with everything that you're taking with you, and it's just, it's like being locked into a little sardine can and sealed up would just be, well, even when we were watching Apollo 13 yesterday, they're sitting there and they're getting all dressed and the music's all dramatic, right? And they put the helmet on and you got air? Yeah, cool, good. And I go, and now they're in that helmet for the next 4 hours. What if you have to scratch your nose? Like, what if your face suddenly itches?
It's actually a thing.
It's like, what do you do? And my son Gabriel was like, what if you sneeze?
Yeah.
It's like,
or what if you cry? Chris Hadfield, his eyes teared up, and he got just this glob of water in the helmet, and you can actually drown. So it's a serious thing.
But it's just one of those, as a claustrophobic person, I'm like, and suddenly as I'm watching the movie and thinking about that, my whole face started itching, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah. No, it's a whole thing. I don't know if they have any tricks or hacks, if you will, to minimize that stuff. I'm sure they kind of do. But ultimately, it's a smelly environment. It doesn't smell necessarily good. It's a confined space, and people still have bodily functions. And everything goes into pouches, and on more than one occasion, those pouches break and things happen. And it's something else. And we all grew up dreaming, hey, I want to be an astronaut. But the reality is, maybe not so much. And then
it's grueling.
Yeah, and we're thinking about people, putting people into capsules and on spacecraft for anywhere between 1 to 3 years for round trips to Mars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different thing. Could you imagine being locked in just one room of your house, perhaps the smallest room of your house, for 2 or 3 years? You can't leave. You don't get to leave.
No.
That's.
I would think that they would have to build something, if it's going to be that long of a trip, there'd have to be something more habitable.
Well, the thing is you have to get it from here to there, and that's very expensive.
Yeah.
To put something in orbit costs its weight in gold. So it would cost a
Literally.
pound of gold at the price of gold to get a pound of anything into orbit. So
I would think it'd be even more expensive than that, but okay.
Well, and we are trying to make things cheaper with reusable things.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was all about space, and some of you folks may know, even today, I drive over to the coast to watch the rocket launches. If I can't see them from the
Josh was saying,
coast.
did you guys see the Dragon 2 docking?
Yes.
I'm sure you did.
Yes.
Something that was streamed?
Yeah. It was streamed. I watched the splashdown. The launch I did not watch because it was like at 4 a.m. or something like that. Mm-hmm. It was in the middle of the night. Or maybe it was like around midnight, as I recall. So I do watch these things whenever I have an opportunity to do so. So I'm very much into it. But I don't see a lot of people around me so much into it. I don't see NASA stickers hardly ever.
There's no ticker tape parades when there's a successful launch or anything like that.
Yeah, so it's all kind of been forgotten. And, we talked about this before the show. And the reason for this is it seems like the incentive, like you mentioned, the warfare, if you will, the external
you'll see
threat.
that if you watch the video. You'll see that in the video. Mm-hmm. Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about that as we had to beat somebody. The country got behind because it was the idea. It was the idea. Sputnik went up and it's a little empty ball, but it was launched by a ballistic missile, and that means whoever can be up there can get you from up there. And there was this existential threat to the entire nation that the entire nation got behind. Says we have to be victorious in this, and it was effectively a war. It was a war campaign without shots being fired. Effectively, it was all this. And then when we got there, and the Soviet Union couldn't keep up, and eventually abandoned their space program in the 70s, it became kind of like this. Okay, well, there's no threat to push forward anymore, and the budget just went because, and the people's interest went because okay, well, hey, we're here, cool. Now what?
Yeah,
you
we had Star Wars in the 80s, which was a Reagan initiative really designed to bankrupt the Soviet Union by telling them we were going to put all these fancy satellites and lasers into space. And of course, we really didn't manage to do that, but it made the Soviet Union have to respond, which caused them to spend a lot of money that their economy really couldn't sustain. And ultimately, that led to a lot of shortages and eventually the downfall of. Because
that's usually what happens with socialist and communist countries. But anyway,
I mean, people were doing great up until the mid '80s. The whole breadline thing and stuff, that wasn't normal. That's why that made the news, because it was abnormal. But up until that time, people in the Soviet Union had pretty nice lives.
Unless you crossed the line, then you're sent to a gulag.
And there are literally CIA reports that detail that, the standard of nutrition in the Soviet Union was even at one time better than in the United States.
As long as you don't cross the government.
Yeah, well, it's probably the same today here.
Yeah, that's why there's so many people who be mad at Trump and, oh gosh, they're still alive and then haven't been ran off into a gulag.
Well.
Anyway, so because we gotta poke each other every once in a while.
That's okay.
But
but so anyway, the space program was really born out of World War II. You had a CIA Operation Paperclip, in which the CIA rounded up former Nazi rocket scientists, brought them over to the United States and put them to work on our space program.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, some of these people had been participants in some pretty egregious human rights abuses, such as the building and development of the V-2 rocket, which actually made it up into space more or less, then back down.
Yep.
And they used Jewish slave labor to build those, as well as the launch facilities. But we turned a blind eye to that because these people had the talent that we needed to build our space program. The Soviet Union did the same. They rounded up some Nazi scientists and used them. I imagine the working conditions were a little more harsh, but the Soviet Union had quite an axe to grind, more of an axe than what we did.
Yeah.
So it was personal for them.
Yeah, because it was the losses on the Soviet side in World War II were just.
Yeah. So And then, of course, you have the Cold War, right?
Yeah.
The threat of nuclear war. The thing is we don't assume that there is an existential threat, but there is. There's a massive existential threat that we face that is far greater than the Soviet Union or anything that we faced in World War II.
It's just not immediate. That's the problem. It's not immediate.
Right. We
don't
immediate. See it because we're insulated by our quality of life here in the United States.
And the speed of which, like, okay, it's going to take a long, we still have time to whereas like in an instant, suddenly you could look up and there could be nuclear missiles coming at you. You know what I mean? Like that existential threat doesn't exist in any way now.
Mm-hmm. So there's really no compulsion on the part of the American taxpayer, I think, to fund and support NASA, which I think had its budget slashed by, I think, $500 million just this week, today or yesterday or whatever. They announced that there would be a new budget, and the budget was going to be $500 million less.
That's like one shuttle right there?
Yeah, I don't know. But the fact is, we do face an existential threat, but the question is, can NASA, can a space program help us to address the existential threat, which to me is the state of our environment and capitalism. But, the state of the environment and the Earth going downhill, and I think we do have to address this much like as if it were a war. Mm-hmm. We have to take very seriously how we marshal and steward our resources, how we care for the environment, how we do everything from manage all of our resources. I'm not saying that we can't use resources. I'm not saying that we all have to become vegetarians or anything like that. But we literally have to reinvent the nation from the ground up. We have to change the way we do agriculture. We have to change the way that we farm and ranch and provide all of our food. We have to change the way we move from coast to coast in this country. I'm not saying we do away with personal vehicles, but we need vehicles that are far more efficient and don't pollute like, the automobiles that we have today. We probably need to develop a whole new way of caring for, healthcare. We need to revamp the educational system so we have people who are smart enough to adapt and survive and thrive in this brave new world that we need to build. And we need to approach that as though it were a war, because if we don't take it that seriously, I think the enemy of our own greed and the way that we plunder the earth and all of that, resource exhaustion, Malthusian collapse, is going to hit us just as hard as a nuclear attack.
So let me posit this to you.
Sure.
Every major technological advancement we have seen across the world effectively has come from war.
Now I disagree with that, by the way, but
I mean, as far as technology being brought, there was ideas existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Einstein didn't come up with.
But the production and it becoming part of our life was because of war. There is no other economic driving force in human history as there is in war. The accomplishments that happen in a society because of the threat of war or because of war is the only thing that moves society forward.
Mm-hmm. So,
I'm positing the question: is war a necessary evil for progress?
No, I don't believe so. But
history would show us
it seems to supercharge progress because suddenly the state has to acquire a lot of capital, and then it can spend that capital on the development of new things, such as the machinery of war.
Yeah.
That drives innovation, because suddenly there's money to be made,
There's a threat that people get behind. They want to be defended. So they're willing to give up more and they're willing to see money spent in that area because they sense a threat and they want to be protected. And there's money to be made by people who are making not necessarily weapons of war, but technology of war. Everything about this right here, miniaturization of batteries, GPS, cellular communication, everything in this, what we hold right now, would not exist without the threat of war. It would have been thought of. Somebody might have thought it. Scientists would, that's good. But there would have been no motivation to make it without the threat of war, without a government saying we need to advance in these technologies or else that government will do it and defeat us.
So are you saying that we don't need capitalism, we just need war in order to advance technologically?
It's possible. I'm positing that question of, is war a necessary evil for progress.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm sure that there have been periods where of peace in history where we have seen progress and expansion and growth.
When?
Yeah,
are you calling the 80s? Maybe?
Well, I don't know. I can't,
because that was still under the threat of war. Here's the thing.
Well, think about the 90s. The 90s, we had won the Cold War. We had no enemy. There was no emergent enemy either until terrorism in 2001, really. And 90s was a period of unparalleled growth.
From the technology invented in the 80s. What technology was invented in the 90s? What was until the threat of terrorism and the whole idea that now we have to protect ourselves cyberly, and we have to do. Then all of a sudden, there's a lot of innovations coming in as far as tracking, as far as communications, and all that kind of stuff. Suddenly, there were tons of innovations coming in at that point. But in the 90s, we were rolling along on what was pushed in the 80s.
Well, war is the mother of invention. I mean, that's a famous, proverb, if you will. War is the mother of invention, and I definitely think.
But I think it coincides with the one that everybody hears is necessity is the mother of invention.
Well,
are they interchangeable?
War and necessity, I suppose.
I'm saying is, are those two terms interchangeable?
Right. So,
I don't know that you can have the advances in NASA that you're looking for without the threat of war. With someone.
So even a capitalist reward would not be sufficient to pioneer?
No, the capitalist need would be there, but there's no money to be made. The capitalists say there's no money to be made. There's not enough demand. The government produces the demand for war machines and puts all that out, and there's where the money to be made. Who needs all those things? Who can individually pay for all those things? There is no need for it, so there is no capital. There is no capitalistic reward for doing those things until somebody really needs those things. So I have an idea.
Okay,
I have an idea. This is what NASA can do. This is black helicopter conspiracy time.
Okay.
All right. This is what NASA can do.
Get my foil hat on.
Yeah, get your foil hat on. We're going to be. I'm sure that we are in jeopardy now of the FBI and CIA now tracking our broadcast. Yeah, we're already on the list. But here's what NASA needs to do. NASA needs to orchestrate behind the scenes. Orchestrate somehow the private sector technology that's getting us into space right now, and somehow get that into the hands of who our government considers to be our enemies.
Give our technology to
create a new space race.
Well, that's coming. China,
exactly. Yeah, but not openly, but like undercover. Give them technology that you know what I mean, so that suddenly they advance. Past us and become competitive, create a competitor so that there is the existential threat.
Well, China is often mentioned as a competitor because China is trying to get to the moon. But the problem is we already beat them there. We got there in 1969. And nobody's going to beat the Voyager spacecraft or the Pioneer 10 and 11.
None of those things are threats to us, though. But I'm saying
New Horizons or any of that.
Right, but again, you're talking about scientific exploration projects. Nobody cares. That's not an existential threat if somebody gets a scientific exploration project. I'm talking an enemy getting a foothold in space. That creates an existential threat. Nobody cares if whether or not they didn't make, they haven't got a probe that's gone past Pluto. Well, so what? They have now a satellite orbiting over us with weapons on it.
Well,
that is the existential threat that would kick the government into high gear of let's defend ourselves.
China seems to be the up and coming competitor. I like how we talk about China as our enemy. Big ugly communist China, which is also our biggest trading partner. Fancy that, right? And
well, I mean,
that may invigorate.
The Soviet Union was our ally in World War II as well.
Well, ally,
exactly,
right? Ideologically, they were very much opposed to us, and in fact, at the end of World War II, it wasn't clear that they were going to stop. In Berlin,
yeah,
there was genuine fear they were going to continue all the way to the coast of France.
But I'm just saying.
But that's another. That's
right.
Another
but I'm
thing.
just saying that precedent has already been shown in history that yes, we can be getting along with this right here, but still in a switch can become our enemy.
Well, I think again, as Josh pointed out, climate change has those aspects.
But it doesn't. It doesn't to the people.
That's the problem with climate change is it doesn't have a human face,
and it doesn't have immediacy. It does not have the immediacy,
which it should.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Right.
That's why I'm saying there needs to be another motivation. So that's why I'm saying no. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. That scientifically, you believe that the existential threat is there.
It is there,
but it just doesn't. It's
we could
not
be hit by an asteroid. That's an actual threat. That's there.
Right, but that's not. In fact,
we will be hit by one. It's just a matter of when, not if.
Well, yeah, but that's could be millions of years, tens of thousands of years. It could be. Yeah, exactly. We don't know. It's not. Again, it's not it's right there, and in 90 minutes it could destroy us. That's the threat that the Soviet Union was to the United States, or at least in the eyes of the people who were building bomb shelters in their homes. Because it was at any moment we could be looking up and seeing nuclear, mushroom clouds over our cities.
So what you're saying is we need, we almost have to put a gun to people's heads, if you will, figuratively at least, if not literally, to get them to really do anything. Otherwise, people are going to do what? Just
that's human nature. Because human nature, people are lazy.
Not care.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
I believe that's what our history shows us, and I believe that's what's going on here. So that's why I'm somewhat tongue-in-cheek saying, hey, NASA, go give all your best information to our enemy. Give all your secrets to our enemy. Somebody hide it over there. Let our enemy get ahead of us. Let who our government thinks is our enemy get ahead of us, drastically ahead of us, and that'll kick in your motivation, and there you go. You got your budget back.
Well, we need every retired astronaut in America to visit every elementary school in America.
Nobody's going to care about that.
Yeah, I know. But no, I think that needs to happen because if they go and they talk to these kids, some of those kids are going to get the bug. And I can't think of a greater PR campaign than to go on, literally a publicity tour in which somebody from NASA goes to every single school, especially an astronaut. Wow. Elementary school. We literally have to go out and we have to reach the youth and we have to inspire them and say that there's all these solutions out there to all of these problems have on Earth.
Is the word esoteric?
We have to pull together. Well, esoteric is like secret or hidden knowledge, like, only the professor knows.
What is it? It's too, it doesn't connect.
Well, maybe not for you and I, but, an astronaut meeting a kid, it's going to connect with that kid, at least a percentage of them.
It's just not enough. It's not. It doesn't solve it. I'm telling you, you got to give away those secrets to our enemy.
Ultimately, we could fund NASA with infinite money. We could give NASA the resources to go to the moon.
And here's the thing that might surprise everybody. You and I would agree with that. You and I would agree that funding NASA is one of the best things that you could do for our society in general, for the future.
Well, yeah, but it's not the cure-all that some people seem to say. Because in my opinion...
Abstract. Thank you, Josh.
In my opinion, if we don't figure out how to coexist on this planet and how to make do, how to live within our means, if you will, going to another planet, going to even a whole nother solar system, even if we could do that successfully, we're simply going to take our flawed humanity to another planet, and we're going to spread around all of our bad habits and destroy that planet too.
But you're yes and no. You're forgetting the side effect. As we build to get there, we generate technologies that fix here.
Yes. Yeah, we can do that. And I'm saying we need to do that. But at the end of the day, how do you solve for human greed? How do you solve for the human compulsion to just be a jerk to your neighbor?
Let me help you. Let me help you with that right now. His name is Jesus Christ. He died on the cross for your sin to change you from the inside out, and that's why I do what I do. And that's what accepting Christ in your life is supposed to do for you, is make you a better person who's going to make better decisions and look out for your neighbor.
Where do we put the cross on the NASA logo? The problem with that is there's a lot of Christians who are jerks, frankly. So
get with the program, people.
It doesn't stick. It sticks with a few people, but it doesn't stick with many. And so I don't.
But
know
it's worth
that's
it, right?
The solution.
It's worth it.
If it worked, I might, from my utilitarian perspective, say, yeah, let's do it because the benefits would outweigh.
Yet, I just showed you that sending astronauts to schools isn't going to do anything, but it's just maybe a little effect, and you're behind that. You're behind just a little effect. Why aren't you behind this? Even if it makes a little effect and it's positive, why aren't you behind that?
I didn't say that I'm not necessarily behind it. I'm okay with.
Why not encourage that
improvement? We can. I'm not going to discourage it. I don't have any problem with, let's say, someone like John Glenn, who is an American hero, astronaut, senator, and also very Christian. And he went around and he told people, he shared his faith when he did communicate or speak with people. There was a reference, he was told Godspeed John Glenn on liftoff.
Yeah.
We had other astronauts read from the Bible, on the Apollo missions. And I don't have a problem with Christianity in space. Actually, I kind of like it there.
Christianity in space.
You're going to put all the Christians on the moon, and suddenly the Earth is a happy place. I'm joking. Have you
ever seen The Expanse? The TV show The Expanse?
No.
It was on Sci-Fi. Now it's on. That's one of the plot points in there is that there's an entire group of Latter-day Saints. Mormons. Mm-hmm. An entire group of Mormons 200 years in the future who are building a spacecraft to go to another planet and populate the planet, and that's part of the driving plot of they have the one spacecraft that can make it there. So everybody's trying to get that spacecraft to get anyway.
There you go. There you go.
See,
but I really think we have to deal with the problems that we have on Earth, and on one level, those problems are personal. How do we work with and cooperate with one another, especially people who are not part of our in-group? How do we cooperate with complete and total stranger, people of different races, people of different nationalities, different religions or philosophies, different wherever, as different as people can be, we have to figure out a way to come together and work together towards a common goal.
And that's why we are doing this podcast. Share it with everybody you know, post it to your Facebook, let everybody see what's going on right here, because this is part of the answer. This is two people who are diametrically opposed in almost every way, still coming together twice a week, Sundays at 5, Mondays at 4, and having these discussions and trying to
model the behavior.
Yes, trying to model behavior. So
model the behavior. Yes.
Tell everybody this is how it's done. This is what the future is right here.
Yeah, well, you and I do have some fundamental disagreements. Nonetheless, if something came down to it, I would want to team up with you. I'd want you on my zombie apocalypse team.
Yeah, because I have guns.
Well, yeah, there's that. I have philosophy, so if the gun doesn't work, I'll bore, or the zombie will be like, no, that's
let me
a
tell
fallacy.
you this right here. Yep. And he's gone.
There you go. So, I really think it's important for us to support NASA. However, I also think we have to work amongst ourselves to cooperate, to get along. And if we can start doing that, if we can start living within our means on this planet, making use of the resources we have without exhausting the resources we have left, then I think we'll be mature enough to go out into space. Because when you leave for space, you're going to, at best, be on, a space station or a space colony, if you will, and your resources are going to be very limited. And you're not going to get any more. You might get more sunlight or something through the solar panels. You might get, a good supply of energy.
You just walk up to the replicator and you say,
right?
Tea,
Star
Earl
Wars.
Grey, hot. Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Come on. You missed that. How could you? I even did the Captain Picard tea, Earl Grey, hot.
Yeah, I know. But at the end of the day, if we can't live in a closed environment, because really Earth is mostly a closed environment. Now, we get a lot of sunlight. We get energy from the outside. It's not completely closed. But our biome is, there's only so much landmass. There's only so much ocean. There's only so many fish in the sea, trees on the land. And we can produce more.
But they're all designed to reproduce.
They do reproduce, but the problem is in the status quo, we are consuming them faster than they can reproduce. And if we maintain this trend, and if we as humans continue to reproduce faster than the planet can handle our growing population, which is mostly because of our behavior. The planet can absolutely handle our population.
Yeah.
But because of our destructive behavior, we're doomed. So we either have to
and I've been hearing that
out.
for 40 years.
Well, it's true. It happened on Easter Island, in the micro. If you look at what happened to Easter Island, the Easter Islanders basically destroyed themselves because they cut down all the trees on the island. They completely denuded the landscape. They ended up not having anything left to eat. They starved. And then when the Europeans finally arrived, they found people who were easy for enslavement. Mm-hmm. And there you go. That's the end of Easter Island. There are very few native Easter Islanders left. And what happened on that island is going to happen on this planet as a whole. Now, I don't know if somebody's going to come along and enslave us, but we're going to end up with resource, destruction, and we're going to end up with warfare over limited resource, things like water. That's what Malthus predicted back in the day when he was writing.
We don't have to, collapse. California. All you have to do is build more reservoirs, and when it pours like it is right now, we actually can save the water and store it and use it instead of it just running into the ocean because California lawmakers won't make more reservoirs. Mm-hmm. So let's be smart about that.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the problem with, building, dams and such is then what's the impact on the environment? People don't realize that the Kings River, which is north of us in Fresno, was the largest salmon run in North America until it was finally dammed up near the Delta. Mm-hmm. So when they did all of these water projects to make the valley fertile, they also prevented salmon from coming upstream and populating the salmon run. Now, we probably have a greater benefit because the agriculture is pretty massive compared to having a little bit of salmon. Nonetheless, when we do these major projects, we are tampering with the environment, and there are impacts. And it's not necessarily for free. It's always a trade-off.
It's not for free, but the benefit outweighs the negative.
In most cases, the problem is sometimes there's a trade-off that we're making that we don't realize we're making. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, then it's like, oh man, what do we do now?
But hey, progress. You have to do it.
So yeah.
Look at this. We switched places. I'm now the progressive.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm in favor of progress, but the progress has to be smart. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you can give us all the technology there is. Look at how technologically sophisticated we are today compared to 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. But are we any better than our ancestors were 2,000 years ago?
Are we better human beings?
Are we better human beings? I mean, you know the Bible, and the Bible talks about the same issues that we have today. There's a reason why people still read the Bible today, because it's amazingly relevant, regardless of whether or not you feel that it's a body of mythology or you feel it's, fact, word for word. It still has some relevance because people are no different today than they were 2,000 years ago.
There's literally a point in our message yesterday at church. One of the points was, because we're talking, the message yesterday was following the word of God. We're in a series called Follow Back. Like Jesus is following you. Do you want to follow him back? Social media, anyway. I thought it was pretty clever. But it's following the word, and one of the points was the Bible is a great source of wisdom, because it's like, what if you could gather up all the wisdom and thoughts and life lessons from hundreds of, inspirational, impactful world leaders and put it all into one book? And that's what they did. That's what the Bible is. It's literally stories of people and their mistakes, and you can learn from their mistakes. It doesn't hide. It doesn't hide the bad things they did. It doesn't hide the mistakes they made. You can look at it and read it and open up and read Proverbs and be like, wow, that's pretty wise. It's a good collection, even on its own. Just like that, it's a great collection of wise things to look at and to read, just for the sake of gaining wisdom.
But what does it say about us then if we have this wisdom collected into one book, and people do claim to read that book, and yet we continue to make the same mistakes? We are literally no better off, just we have cell phones and electricity now. Our toilets flush. What does that say about us?
It says we're human and we need a savior.
Well, the problem is time's running out.
Yeah. But but that's what it means. That's literally what it is. It's proven the point of why we need a savior, why you need a personal savior, and why you need to do that to become a better person and really embrace that.
So I think,
I'm always going to come back to that.
We need to fund and support NASA, but I think we need to address the issues here on this planet. And the issues on the planet are actually more important. But we also need to do NASA. We can't say we're not going to do NASA. In fact, if you look at the history of the world, when nations turn inward and they ignore that let's go out and explore and participate and engage with the rest of the world, that's when their civilizations collapse. Well, no, you don't have to go conquering. So when you look at China, for example, when China turned around and turned inward, which is about the same time that Columbus was starting to go out and the Spanish and the Portuguese were exploring. After that, Chinese civilization essentially went into a period of decline.
Yeah.
But up until that time, they actually had the largest fleets and the largest ships and the best navigators on the planet. And they may have even reached the West Coast, or some people speculate, of the United States, of North America, I mean. But then the Spanish went out and the Portuguese went out. And then when they turned inwards.
You correct yourself, United States. Sorry, North America.
Yeah.
America is named after a European guy. Who
yes.
did, you know what I mean? So that's not even, you corrected yourself to something that you thought was more politically correct, and it's just as politically incorrect.
Well, the idea is to communicate meaning, to people. I'm not trying to imply some political agenda here.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to simply say is when nations turn
I'm just saying
inward,
it's okay to say United States.
Okay, when nations turn inward, that's when, they tend to collapse.
So basically, to get what you want for what progressives want, what progressives are looking for in advancing our future, I think because of human nature, that advancement is only a side effect of imperialistic activity.
No, I don't think the imperialism is necessary. And frankly, if that's the price, it's not worth it. It's too high a price.
Okay.
I don't think it is ever appropriate to subjugate another person or another civilization for the purpose of advancing yourself. You're literally just stepping on someone's neck to get up to the next higher rung on the ladder.
But where we are at NASA is because of that. Where we are currently at NASA is because of that. And you're okay with that.
Well, no, I'm not necessarily okay with that, but it's a statement of fact. I can be as not okay about it as I wish. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't change the facts. A fact is a fact, whether we like it or not. And I don't like the fact that American history is built on the backs of multiple civilizations and multiple people who we have exterminated through genocide, people that we have enslaved, people that we have traditionally oppressed, people that we continue to oppress around the world. I don't like any of this stuff.
I understand that. I don't like it. I don't like it either. I'm just saying I don't think you can get the progress without it.
There may be something to that. Certainly
it's an unfortunate
right.
Yeah.
But it's.
I'm not cheering on war.
It's 40
to get
pieces
it. I'm
of
just
silver,
saying.
right? Is it 40 or 30?
30.
How many? 30. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's our 30 pieces of silver. We're literally selling our soul, and we're betraying other fellow humans left and right on this planet for the 30 pieces of silver. So what are we going to do with those 30 pieces of silver? We can either hang ourselves, or perhaps we can buy something to sort of help pay reparations to all humanity. And so
blood money is okay to spend as long as it's for the good.
Well, it's present. We have it. So what are you going to do? Burn it and bury it? Or should we use it to pay reparations for the people who we've harmed? And there are many ways we can do that. And a space program can be part of that. If we do develop technology we share the benefits of that technology.
Okay, so that would suffice when going back to our conversation of reparations for slavery, advancement in science and pushing civilization forward with NASA would also pay back reparations to slavery.
No, it's not going to suffice, and it will never suffice.
But I'm just saying, we don't have to actually pay cash back. You're saying that it can be done through progress.
Well,
progress
all
that benefits all mankind would be a way of paying back reparations.
The world has essentially paid in, oftentimes unwillingly, to the largesse that we have that has allowed us to progress scientifically. And we owe some of that scientific knowledge, then if not the bulk of it or all of it, back to the people from whom we have taken. So basically what I'm trying to say in plain English is the advancements that are made by NASA, for example, need to be shared with the whole world.
Yeah.
They shouldn't
as they have been
hoarded, and they traditionally have been.
Yeah.
But those advancements definitely need to be shared. And no, it's not enough. It's not reparations, but it's the least we can do with what we've got. Cool.
Well, this has been a valid answer with Scott and Marshall talking about NASA and some things we agree on, some things we don't agree on. Some, a lot of my, what I was suggesting hopefully was obvious that it was kind of tongue in cheek. I'm not actually advocating for war and, the selling of, secrets, but I'm just saying that might be, I mean, historically it's shown that's why we're here. And, that was all tongue in cheek. So please don't, you can send the letters, but, don't think that I was being serious. Like, hey, I want to start a war. That's not what's going on.
You can comment on our Facebook.
Yes. Comment on our Facebook. Email us at valadanswer@gmail.com. Comment on Facebook right there. Find us a Valid Answer on Facebook, kerncast.com, where we're here every Friday. I always say that every Sunday at 5, every Monday at 4. Coming up next on Kerncast is Denise Gary. And man, this has been a fun day. Till next time. See you guys later.
Thank you.